Zurabchivili, who joins me now from Tbilisi. Madam, thank you so much for joining us here on Sky News. Now, you have yourself been at those protests in the past. You've recently addressed the nation. You said no one can take away Georgia's independence. You obviously think that that's happening. Tell us why.
Well, what is happening is that Georgia has gone through a series of attempts to change its course, attempts that were led by the ruling party or the ruling one person that has tried through the introduction of the Russian law, through the introduction of different laws that were all going against the EU recommendations to change the path that was guaranteed by the granting of the status of candidate at the end of last year. So it's really an usurpation of our destiny, of our future, and that's how people resent it. They also resent very much the fact that the elections were stolen by a very well organized, very Russian or Soviet-style organized election. They saw this election stolen from them, and since then, there is no recognition of the legitimacy of the parliament, where no opposition party has entered. It's a one-rule parliament, not legitimate, not recognized by our democratic partners, that is electing a government that is not legitimate, that tomorrow will probably elect a president that will not be legitimate. And meanwhile, people on the streets, since the decision by a non-legitimate government to change what is written in the constitution, that our path is the Euro-Atlantic integration path, and try to reorient it towards Russia, is something that has stirred this enormous reaction on the streets of Tbilisi that is growing every hour and every day. But more important, that the street protests, which are something that we have seen already under the Russian law twice, last spring and this spring. But this time, it's the whole country that is in eruption.
Madam, forgive me for jumping in there. I mean, you mentioned that, in your opinion, the election was stolen. The EU Parliament also said that these elections, the ones in October that were won by the Georgian Dream Party and put Irakli Karabalridze as the Prime Minister, were neither free nor fair. I mean, you mentioned the switch, I guess, between being more open towards the West, towards the EU, and a more encroaching Russian presence. What would you want either the EU or Western nations to do about it, if anything?
What they are doing, exactly what they are doing. You've mentioned the European Parliament. None of our democratic partners, European or American, have recognized until this day elections that happened more than 1 month ago. And the more it goes, the less, of course, there is any chance that they would recognize, because the people on the street, and that is democracy, are saying with their feet that they do not want to go back to Russia, and that they want to consolidate what was their past for the last 30 years. And more important, what I was trying to say is that we are seeing what we have not seen in this country at any period of time, which is that the whole country is really standing in protest. People are deserting the different ministries. The diplomatic corps people are resigning because they consider that they have been their whole life striving to get Georgia on this European track, and that today what they're seeing is a treason by people that are not elected, and that certainly are not elected to change the path of Georgia and to receive compliments from Mr. Putin or Mr. Dugin.
Speaking of President Putin, let me just bring a statement to you that we heard from the Georgian Prime Minister, Karabalridze. He characterized the protests on Saturday. He called them violent demonstrations, but he also said some foreign entities wish to see the Ukrainization of Georgia with a Maidan-style scenario. And the Maidan, of course, is the revolution in 2014, which in one way or another led to the initial attacks of Russia into Ukraine. I guess the echo of Ukraine, or the shadow of what's happening between Ukraine and Russia, must weigh heavy in Georgia. What impact do you think that has on the psyche of the nation and the actions of the people?
I don't think that it has. It never had. Georgia has been resilient in its long path towards Europe, towards independence, towards keeping its freedom from Russia. It's a very long story. And what is happening today is certainly not a revolution. It's certainly not something that is not led by very peaceful people, and you can see it on your pictures right now. These people are very determined, but very peaceful. And what we are seeing, the civil unrest, is much more important, because that means people are not cooperating anymore with the illegitimate government.
But, Madam, I mean, regardless of how the people, forgive me for interrupting you, but, you know, as you say, the people may be holding strong. But do you fear a more expansionist attitude from Russia, you know, compared to maybe 10 years ago? Do you think that that is the direction of travel for Russia and for parts of Eastern Europe?
What is happening is that Russia cannot win the war in Ukraine, has not been able over these 2.5 years to win the war in Ukraine, but is now trying to win election wars, not only in Georgia. It has tried to do so in Moldova without succeeding. It is trying to do so in Romania with a very surprising result of the first round and the decision of the Constitutional Court. And it has tried to do so with the help of this pro-Russian government, and one can call them that, in Georgia. But that doesn't work. And we're going to have a stable transition towards new elections. That's what the European Parliament has been calling for. That is what our partners are supporting. And that is what, and that's the most important.
Madam, forgive me, we're running out of time. I would just like to ask you one final question. I mean, you mentioned new elections, that certainly the European Parliament has made its views clear. I mean, obviously that they are not a given, you know that. What other options could there be for Georgia's future if the road to further integration with the EU and Western Europe in general is sort of barred maybe, or made more difficult? Then what role could Georgia have? A neutral role? Or do you think that if closer ties with the West don't happen, then the Russian sphere of influence will expand?
Certainly not. There is no way in which this country that has two territories occupied, that has known all the aspects of Russian imperialism, what it means to take away your language, to take away your religion, to take away your traditions, and to try to completely subdue the population. There is no way that this population is going to accept that. There is only one future for Georgia. It's one independent and European future. That's the one we have been pursuing since the independence. And that is why what you're seeing now is a very strong movement. And again, the civil part of the movement, the civil society, not only the protests on the streets, is what is going to make the difference, because there is no way a one-party rule and a one-man rule, which is Mr. Ivanishvili with his ties to the Kremlin, can survive when it has no legitimacy from its own people, when it has no support from its partners, and no support from the economy.
Madam, we're going to have to leave it there. Salome Zurabishvili, President of Georgia. Madam, thank you so much for sharing your views with us. Thank you.